Anonymous, let's talk about the tables being turned and you being the person being interviewed for a job. And Phil, there are 5 pretty, I don't know if these are difficult questions or not, but there's certainly questions that people may come across in a job interview. For example, what is your project management approach and methodology?
Now, that question, Emily. One thing I wouldn't do if I was asked that question in an interview is talk about tools and Gantt charts and start mentioning a bunch of tools. That is not really what this question is asking, in my opinion. When it talks about approach to me is all about your mindset. So how do you approach project management? How do you see project management? What are some of the key tenets that you have in your head as you are working on the project? For example, being the solely accountable person, being the belly button accountability person, being the person who needs to equip the team, develop the team, and not defer to the functional manager or someone else when things go wrong. So it's like, what is your mindset to project management? And then talking about methodology, again, you don't want to get too much into the tools and the techniques. You might want to talk about umbrella terms such as authority. My method is to obtain the right level of authority, or to work with the functional managers or the external managers like the initiator or sponsor to obtain the right amount of authority. Part of a methodology could be that you plan, and the dimensions you plan could be talked about. So in a previous episode, you talked about the triple constraints of time, cost, scope, talking about what needs to be planned and talking about executing. Now, it's hard to say this if you don't really do it, but when it comes to executing, what managers are looking for typically when they ask that question is, are you able to get stuff done? Are you able to get up from behind the desk, stop sending out crazy emails to people, and actually go to where the problems are, solve the problems, pat people on the back for a job well done, and make things happen, make things move. So to me, a method is more than just rattling off a bunch of
Agile, waterfall.
There you go, exactly.
Yeah.
And it sounds ridiculously robotic at the end of the day. So if one can really be true to what you're doing and what you want to gain, what you want the team to gain from you being at the helm, that will be more method. And then the last two, I would say the monitoring and controlling aspects should be touched on, and then lessons learned and closing out the project. That would be how I would tackle that question.
That type of question. Well, what about questions that ask you to distinguish yourself from other project managers? That's kind of, tell me a little bit about yourself, that old question that we always come across in interviews.
It is, and it's an opportunity for you to showcase your talents, not in a proud fashion, but just a matter of fact, what have you done on previous projects? I always like to anchor back to data rather than just say, oh, I'm the best at what I do. Well, how do I know? Who said that? Did you say that? So I wouldn't go with those, empty statements. What distinguishes you from other PMs would be maybe tenacity with proof of where you are tenacious, maybe skill level with proof. Typically, you don't want to rattle off a bunch of certifications. Well, I'm a PMP, So no. Those don't go very far. And those actually disqualify you. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a lot of... So being a PMP means that you have 3 years of experience as a project manager. That doesn't necessarily distinguish you from the 600,000 PMPs that exist. It's more about, your spirit and your work ethic and your communication style and your tenacity, like you said. What about the question, describe your project management career goals and really your plans for the next 5 years? I think this is always a fun question, but it can be tricky when you're talking about 5 years.
It is. 5 years. And, that question, people should be careful with it because it could be a double-edged sword. It could show you're very ambitious. And at the same time, it could show that you have no business being in this position. Because if your goals in the next 5 years
are to CEO.
become the CEO, probably not a good fit.
But we all want to be the CEO.
Everybody wants to. But in an interview, you need to address what is being asked in reality, and if this is a CEO segue type position,
Yeah.
but if you're going for senior project manager, hey, let's be real. Can it happen? Absolutely. But what are your goals with reference to that position? I would talk about what I want to get done in that position. So the next 5 years for me would be I've been effective in the role I'm being employed to do. I've brought up someone. I have a succession plan. I'm
Yeah.
going to leave a legacy such that if I move on, there's someone else to take over from me.
I
Things
think
like
it's also helpful in this to understand your organization and also the industry in which you are interviewing, knowing the pain points of that organization and how you can help them grow, because we know projects are how changes happen and how innovation happens. And it's really, projects are at the cusp of bringing your organization sometimes into a whole new arena. And so this is a real big opportunity to indicate to whoever is interviewing you that you know your stuff and you
That's
know that
true.
industry and you care.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What about discussing the disadvantages of a central project management office? Disadvantage, that's almost a negative question there.
It is, and that's a play on whether you understand the difference between a matrixed organization and a projectized organization, and if you really know what organization you're interviewing in. If it's projectized, you can tackle it in one way. If it's matrix, you can tackle it in, well, it's a matrixed organization, so what works in business unit X may not work in business unit Z, and talking about adaptability. For question 4, you definitely need to know the flavors of project management practiced in the firm, because if
Yes.
they have an agile and a scrum and a waterfall or fully plan driven, that might be an advantage for you to talk about those flavors and how one shouldn't be too regimented in saying it has to be that on this project and so on. That could be a disadvantage.
But if you're interviewing for a PMO position, which is a centralized position, you want to flip that around to, here's how I can help reap the positives. We might have some issues right now, but this is easily solved by communicating more and keeping centralized records and getting the word out there to everyone else how much we care about the projects and the environment.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. What about this last one? In your experience, what is the biggest barrier, in your opinion, to implementing management's project management objectives?
Biggest barrier? To address this, I would be honest,
Yeah.
because I truly believe it. And, going into interviews, I speak what I believe. And if you don't agree with me, it's unfortunate. But I think one of the biggest barrier to implementing management, which is the management of the firm, implementing the objectives, is typically management themselves. It's true, because management don't set up the stage the right way for the PM to come in with the right level of conferred authority, especially in functional organizations. If management could set the stage, if management could come down to the level of the people who are going to take that project and run with it the next day and address their concerns, if management could do that, that would be great. But that is usually a barrier. It's usually, hey, PM, go do this, without setting the stage. What do you think?
Well, I agree with that. I'd like to back that up also with, very often managers, senior managers, don't like change. And because project management is about implementing change, if you don't have management behind you and someone communicating and getting the word out that this project is an important piece of the organization, then it's less likely that the overall result of the project is going to succeed. And there is data behind that. Mm-hmm. But that's a challenge in an interview to say, well, management is the problem.
It is, and, personally, that's just me because I can back it up with facts. But
Yeah.
it says the biggest barrier. If I'm going to talk about
Yeah.
other barriers, another one which they would like to hear in some firms is weak project manager. A weak project manager who cannot take the vision, embrace the vision, run with the vision, fulfill the vision, push the vision, enable people better understand it. That could also be a barrier. So, in hindsight, now that you bring that up, well, Phil, just kiss the job goodbye, because that's the end. It
Scarcity
might
of resources, including me. Sorry.
it might be good to balance it, right? It might be good, even though I truly, truly, truly believe that in a lot of firms, management don't do a good enough job, and it's just my belief. And maybe the person interviewing me is from management. That might be Phil. Sorry, you don't get the job. So I might throw in some instances, to be fair, PMs are weak. They're not able to take initiative. They're not able to share. But I will tackle that very carefully. And that's the whole reason why we're doing this, right? It's so that people have the light bulb turned on and can see some ideas on how to manage these questions.
Yeah, well, thank you for going through that. And please do send in more questions to pmanonymous.com.
Thank you.